Welcome back. 5 months since the historic deal was reached on Iran's nuclear program, Tehran says that sanctions relief is only a matter of weeks away.
We invite all foreign companies and governments who would like to cooperate with Iran to use this opportunity and benefit from Iran as the most secure country in the region.
But despite that invitation, one country isn't welcome. Tehran has decided to block the import of more than 200 American consumer goods. Chewing gum and cigarettes are among the products that will not be appearing on the Iranian market. Other comforts, such as DVDs and food imports, they will also be restricted. Military hardware also comes under the ban. Jamal Abdi from the National Iranian-American Council thinks that the two countries are about to change places.
The United States has its own export ban on Iran. U.S. businesses will not be able to take advantage of the fact that the sanctions will be lifted and Iran will now be open to business. Not because of any Iranian policy, but because of American policy. Iran's president has forged sort of this new moderate path, and I think coupled with the nuclear deal being implemented, and then couple that with the fact that all these companies will start to go into Iran, and suddenly you're going to have an Iran that looks very different on the world stage, and it's going to be not Iran that is isolated and left out, but the United States because of its own embargo as well as these attempts by hardliners in Iran to lock the United States out. And so I think that will change the dynamic.
The country's supreme leader has made his position clear. A ban on negotiations with Washington on any other issue except for the nuclear one, that remains intact. Despite progress made during talks over the nuclear program, the countries have not restored diplomatic ties. Political commentator Lou Rockwell believes that the US sanctions against Iran have failed to achieve their goal.
It seems like turnabout is fair play, right? I mean, the US has had horrible sanctions on Iran for some time. These are people who are always blabbing on about free trade. They don't believe in free trade. Free trade means no sanctions. The excuse for them is always, well, we're going to force them to bend to our will and do our bidding. I'm not aware of any country that ever said, okay, we're going to give up, we're going to do exactly what the U.S. does in order to avoid the sanctions. This strikes me as a self-inflicted blow against the Iranian people. They feel they're resisting the U.S., but they're not resisting the U.S. It just means the regular people, business people in Iran are hurt, mostly consumers in Iran are hurt.
One of Europe's top galleries, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, has decided to rename the works of art, the titles of which it deemed to be racially offensive. And these are just 3 of more than 100 paintings whose captions contained the word Negro. It's now been replaced by more neutral alternatives. Among other offenders are the words dwarf and Indian, the terms acceptable centuries ago when the works were created. The museum explained the reasons behind the project, dubbed an adjustment of colonial terminology.
We have about 1 million objects in a catalogue, and I came across some descriptions that were written 100 years ago. And some of those terms were really old-fashioned, and terms where we did not feel too comfortable still using them. And I really felt like if people use our website and they come across these descriptions in our collection, it might be offensive. We don't erase history, we don't whitewash history, because the old terms will still be in the catalogues. But in the main descriptions itself, we change the words.
And it's not the first example of political correctness being applied. In August, the UN Human Rights Committee advised the Dutch to eliminate the character Black Pete, one of Santa's friends, from the country's Christmas lineup. The UN's decision followed violent protests that broke out in the Dutch city of Gouda last year. Demonstrators clashed with police during the celebration of the arrival of St. Nicholas. The activists claim that Black Pete is a racist caricature. So let's find out who exactly he is. Black Pete's a companion of Santa Claus, or St. Nicholas, and is famous for his pranks as well as for the gifts and sweets that he gives to children. The character first appeared in Dutch folklore in 1850, but now many regard it as racist. We spoke to Ted Raw, political cartoonist and author, who thinks that historical characters should be preserved rather than erased.
I think they made the wrong call. I think it's very important to respect history. Here in the United States, we have statues of Confederate generals in the former Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia, which are still up. And it's a lot of people take offense at that, but it is a part of U.S. history. So I think that once you have a historical artifact, whether it be a novel or a painting or a poem, it goes down the wrong path to censor it. It's better to have an open discussion and examine everything in the fullness of time. I mean, even right now, we are creating historical works for the future. We have to move forward, but we can't completely obliterate the past.
The animal kingdom has also been subjected to some rebranding for the sake of political correctness. Earlier this year, bird lovers in Sweden saw the Negro finch become the black finch, and the gypsy bird that is now known by its Latin name. Derogatory terms used towards indigenous minorities were also banned. The Pentagon has admitted that the security situation in Afghanistan has worsened despite the long-term US military presence there. In a report to Congress, defence officials described a series of recent setbacks in the fight against the Taliban insurgency. So let's take a look at some of the key developments. Last week, Taliban militants killed at least 50 people when they stormed an airport in the southern city of Kandahar. And in September, they seized the city of Kunduz and made major territorial gains in the Helmand province. According to the Pentagon report, the number of casualties among Afghan security forces that has surged by 27% this year. And it comes despite a claim from the US Secretary of State just 3 months ago that life in Afghanistan is improving.
Neither should we ignore the remarkable gains that are being made, which defines the promise and future of Afghanistan. The development trends in Afghanistan are positive.
Political analyst Chris Banbury says that Kerry's been trying to whitewash Washington's failure in Afghanistan.
I think when John Kerry says things are getting better in Afghanistan, it really flies in the face of the figures which the US military are releasing. The Obama administration had promised to withdraw US forces from Afghanistan, apart from people doing their training and so on. As you'll recall, Obama had to go back in that and actually put troops back in and maintain troops longer than he promised. And I think when Obama leaves the White House, the Americans will still be bogged down in Afghanistan with no sign of the situation getting better. So I think Kerry is trying to put a gloss on it. I think the Americans are desperate to try and present the best possible picture of what's happened in Afghanistan because, to be honest, the reality in this Pentagon report is a fairly damning indictment of the years of occupation.
Thanks for staying with us here on RT. Boom Bust is up for you next, looking at the US Federal Reserve's decision to raise interest rates for the first time in 9 years.